Sarah Marie Johnson. On September 2nd, 2003, in the affluent Sun Valley area of Bellevue, Idaho, Alan Johnson and Diane Johnson were found deceased in their home on Glen Aspen Drive. Alan, 46 years old, had been struck while sleeping in his bed. Diane, 52 years old, was discovered in the shower where she'd been getting ready for work. Both had been targeted with a .264 caliber Winchester rifle that had been taken from a tenant's guest house on their property. Their daughter, Sarah Marie Johnson, 16 years old at the time, became the immediate focus of the investigation. The family lived among homes valued at over $500,000, seemingly the picture of success and privilege in this Idaho resort community. Sarah attended Wood River High School but had a documented history of clinical depression and a prior attempt on her own life that required intervention. The motive wasn't hard for investigators to establish. Sarah had been in a relationship with 19-year-old Bruno Santos, an undocumented person from Mexico who worked in the area. Her parents had discovered the relationship and were furious about the situation on multiple levels: the age difference, his legal status, and what they saw as his influence on their daughter. They threatened to report Santos for statutory violations and have him removed from the country through deportation proceedings. Neighbors later testified during trial proceedings that Sarah absolutely could not stand her mother, and that physical altercations had occurred between them in the months leading up to the incident. The household was not the peaceful, privileged environment it appeared to be from the outside. There was real tension, real conflict, and real hatred brewing under the surface. What sealed the case against Sarah was the overwhelming forensic evidence that prosecutors methodically presented at trial. A pink bathrobe was found discarded in a garbage can outside the home. The robe contained high-velocity blood splatter from both parents and gunshot residue, proving it had been worn during the incidents. Latex gloves recovered from the scene showed gunpowder residue on the outside, evidence they'd been worn while handling the firearm. But Sarah's DNA was found inside the gloves where her hands had been. Paint residue from the rifle matched paint found on Sarah's t-shirt, connecting her directly to the weapon. Perhaps most damning was what investigators found sitting on her nightstand in plain view. 2 unused .264 bullets sat there, matching the caliber used in the attacks. Her socks bore her mother's blood, despite her claims she never approached the bodies after supposedly discovering them that morning. During the investigation, Sarah maintained her innocence with remarkable consistency. She claimed she'd found her parents after coming home that morning. She said she'd called for help immediately upon making the horrific discovery. She expressed shock and grief at what had happened. But the physical evidence told a completely different story than her words. And forensic science doesn't lie the way people can. Her trial took place from February through March 2005 in Ada County. The trial cost Blaine County over $1 million due to the extensive forensic evidence, expert testimony, and lengthy proceedings required for such a complex case. The prosecution methodically presented each piece of physical evidence: the bathrobe with blood splatter, the gloves with her DNA, the paint residue creating a connection, the bullets on her nightstand, the blood on her socks she claimed never touched the bodies. The defense argued the evidence was circumstantial and that other explanations existed for each piece. They suggested contamination, coincidence, or misinterpretation of the forensic findings. But the jury didn't buy these alternative explanations. On March 16, 2005, Sarah was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree ending. The judge sentenced her to 2 concurrent life sentences without the possibility of parole, plus 15 years for the firearm enhancement that applied to her case. But Sarah and her legal team didn't give up after that conviction. They filed appeal after appeal over the following years, arguing various legal issues and claiming the evidence had been misinterpreted or improperly admitted. The Idaho Supreme Court upheld her conviction in 2008. They tried again with new arguments. The court upheld it once more in 2017, finding no reversible error in the proceedings. She pursued federal remedies through habeas corpus petitions. A federal district court denied her habeas petition in 2019, finding her constitutional rights had not been violated during trial. Still, her attorneys continued fighting through the appellate system. Most recently, on October 30th, 2024, the U.S. Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals affirmed the denial of her latest appeal, closing another legal door in her face. The twist in this case isn't a sudden revelation or new evidence emerging decades later. It's the complete absence of hope for this particular defendant. Unlike some cases where teenage offenders eventually gain parole eligibility or see their sentences reduced due to evolving standards about adolescent brain development and proportional punishment, Sarah Marie Johnson faces no such possibility under Idaho law. She remains incarcerated at Pocatello Women's Correctional Center with the Idaho Department of Correction under inmate number 77,613. She is now 38 years old. She has no parole eligibility date on her record. Every appeal has been consistently denied by every court, state, and federal that has reviewed her case over the past 2 decades. While Sarah Johnson's conviction seems ironclad and permanent, the next case took a dramatically different turn that shocked observers. Charlie Ely. Charlie K. Ely was originally sentenced to life without parole for events that occurred on April 17, 2011, at her Summerfield, Florida mobile home. A teenager named Seth Tyler Jackson had been lured to that location by his ex-girlfriend Amber Wright, who we'll discuss later in this series. The setup was deliberate, and the outcome was horrific. When Jackson arrived at the mobile home that evening, he was attacked by multiple people, including Michael Bargo, who was the ringleader of this group. Jackson was beaten severely and struck with a firearm, then placed in a bathtub where additional harm occurred over an extended period. His body was then burned in a backyard fire pit for hours, with participants tending the fire to ensure complete destruction. Finally, what remained was placed in paint cans and disposed of in a flooded rock quarry, where it wouldn't be easily discovered. Charlie Ely was 18 years old at the time these events unfolded. She was present at the mobile home during the entire ordeal. The prosecution's case painted her as a willing participant who not only allowed her home to be used for this terrible purpose, but actively facilitated what happened by providing the location and not intervening to stop it. Here's where her case becomes fascinating from a legal and constitutional standpoint. Ely's conviction hinged almost entirely on a videotaped police interrogation where Detective Donald Bowie used controversial tactics that would later be scrutinized by federal judges. The detective went so far as to pretend to be Jackson's spirit during the questioning, using psychological manipulation and role-playing to extract statements from a young woman who appeared overwhelmed by the situation. Her trial attorney was Jonathan Bull, who represented her during the original proceedings. He would later face suspension from practicing law in 2018 for unrelated issues involving his conduct in other cases. During Ely's trial, Bull failed to object to portions of the interrogation video that contained testimonial statements that violated her Sixth Amendment right to confront witnesses against her. This wasn't a minor oversight. It was a fundamental failure to protect her constitutional rights. These weren't just technical errors that legal experts quibble about in law review articles. The statements allowed into evidence included claims about what other people said and did, presented through the interrogation video without those people being available for cross-examination. This is exactly the kind of confrontation clause violation that appellate courts take very seriously when reviewing convictions, particularly in cases involving maximum sentences. Eli served nearly 9 years in prison while her case wound through the lengthy appeals process. Her attorneys argued that she'd received ineffective assistance of counsel, that Bull's failure to object to inadmissible evidence had denied her the fair trial guaranteed by the Constitution. Lower appellate courts in Florida initially rejected these arguments, but the case eventually made its way to federal court. In March 2020, U.S. District Judge Roy B. Dalton, Jr. granted her federal habeas appeal, finding her trial counsel had been constitutionally ineffective in representing her interests. This was a massive victory for Ely and her legal team. Federal judges rarely overturn state court convictions, showing substantial deference to state proceedings. But the constitutional violations in her case were too significant to ignore even under that deferential standard. The state of Florida could have retried Eli with proper representation and without the tainted interrogation video. They had that option and the legal right to pursue it. But after reviewing the evidence again and considering what evidence would actually be admissible in a new trial, without the constitutionally problematic interrogation, prosecutors made a different strategic call about how to proceed. On June 17, 2020, Ely pleaded guilty to second-degree ending in a negotiated resolution and was sentenced to 10 years. With time served from her original conviction and good behavior credits earned during her incarceration, she was immediately released that same day after signing the plea agreement. Attorney Jose Baez, who represented Ely in her later proceedings and negotiated the plea, stated she had no role in the attack, no role in the cleanup, and was just a victim of being present at the wrong place at the wrong time. Whether this characterization is completely accurate or somewhat generous is debatable and depends on whose version of events you believe. But it reflects the reality that without the tainted interrogation evidence, the state's case against her was substantially weaker than originally presented. Charlie Ely is now 33 years old, was released in 2020 after nearly 9 years behind bars. She had been sentenced to die in prison under her original conviction. Instead, she walked out as a free woman. Her current whereabouts remain private, as is often the case for released offenders who wish to rebuild their lives away from public scrutiny and media attention. The most recent case on our list happened just last year, and it's still making headlines as legal proceedings wrap up. Tara King. Tara Lynn King and her 18-year-old boyfriend, Uriah Lee Urick Jr., planned what would become a devastating family incident in Backcliff, Texas, a small community in Galveston County. Their target was Tara's grandmother, Tammy King, who was 61 years old and lived in a home where she thought she was safe from harm. The motive was a toxic mixture of multiple issues brewing together. Tammy wouldn't allow Urick to spend the night at her home, which created ongoing tension between the young couple and Tammy. Tammy was trying to set reasonable boundaries about who could stay overnight in her house, exercising normal grandparental authority. But the planning went far beyond simple anger about house rules. Text messages and Instagram exchanges from January 26, 2025, showed the couple discussing in explicit detail their plans to take Tammy's antique coins, cash, and firearms from her home. The messages were disturbing in their casualness and lack of empathy. They discussed specific timing and methods as if they were planning a shopping trip rather than something far more sinister. Messages included phrases like 5.56 shred through skin, referring to ammunition caliber, and "we ride at dawn," treating their plans like some kind of adventure or game. They weren't making vague threats in the heat of anger. They were actively, methodically planning what they would do and when they would do it. On February 5th, 2025, Tammy King was found with a fatal wound to her head inside her Galveston County home. She had been struck by a projectile fired from a firearm at close range. The attack occurred in her own house, a place where she should have been completely safe. Carried out by her own granddaughter and the boyfriend she'd tried to keep at a reasonable distance for everyone's well-being. After the incident, Tara and Uric immediately fled the area in a panic. They attempted to alter their physical appearances to avoid identification, cutting and dyeing their hair to change how they looked. They solicited rides via Instagram messages from people they knew, trying to put as much distance as possible between themselves and the scene. They knew exactly what they'd done, and they knew law enforcement would be looking for them. On February 9th, 2025, just 4 days after Tammy's passing, they were captured at a Dollar General store in Laredo, Texas, which sits right on the Mexican border. They'd made it hundreds of miles from Backcliff, but not quite far enough to escape across international lines. A third defendant, Travis Wayne Hodge, received charges for driving them to Laredo after the incident, helping them flee justice. The case moved through the legal system with remarkable speed, given its recent nature. Uric's trial concluded on November 7th, 2025, with a jury finding him guilty after reviewing the damning text, messages, and forensic evidence. The jury recommended life without the possibility of parole for his role. The evidence against him was absolutely overwhelming. The text messages meticulously planning the incident, his documented presence at the scene, his participation in fleeing afterward, and forensic evidence connecting him directly to what happened to Tammy. Tara King's trial was scheduled for January 5th, 2026, which is happening right around now as you're reading or hearing this. But she made a decision that avoided putting 12 citizens through the trauma of hearing all the evidence. On that same date, January 5th, 2026, Tara pleaded guilty to capital offense in exchange for avoiding a lengthy trial that would have forced her grandmother's family to relive every horrible detail. The judge sentenced her to life without the possibility of parole, the maximum sentence available under Texas law for capital offenses. She is now in Texas Department of Criminal Justice custody, beginning what will be a lifetime behind bars with no hope of release. She was 17 when this happened, barely on the cusp of legal adulthood, but old enough under Texas law to face adult consequences for adult actions. No appeals have been filed yet, given the extremely recent conclusion of her case. She accepted the plea deal, admitted her full role in what happened, and will now serve life without parole. Her grandmother, Tammy, who was just trying to set reasonable boundaries about who could stay overnight in her home, paid with her life for that completely appropriate boundary. While digital evidence doomed Tara King, the next case involved old-fashioned physical evidence and a particularly disturbing aftermath that shocked Illinois. Sarah Kolb. Sarah Ann Kolb was 16 years old when she ended the life of her classmate Adrienne Reynolds in a Taco Bell parking lot in Moline, Illinois. The date was January 21st, 2005. The motive was jealousy. Adrienne had allegedly shown interest in or flirted with Kolb's former boyfriend, and that perceived slight would cost Adrienne absolutely everything. Kolb didn't act alone in carrying out the attack. Her co-defendant, Corey Gregory, who now identifies as Harley Quinn after transitioning, helped by holding Adrienne down while Kolb used a belt to complete the strangulation. The attack occurred in broad daylight in a parking lot, a public commercial space where someone might have seen what was happening and called for help or intervened to stop it. But no one did. But what came next made this case particularly notorious throughout Illinois and beyond. After taking Adrienne's life in that parking lot, Kolb and Gregory took her body to Kolb's grandparents' farm in Aledo, a rural property where they thought they'd have privacy to dispose of evidence. They attempted to burn the body there using accelerants. When that proved insufficient to destroy the remains completely, they recruited another teenager, 16-year-old Nathan Gaudet, to help them solve their problem. Gaudet used his grandfather's handsaw to dismember Adrienne's body, removing the head and arms in a calculated attempt to make identification more difficult if the remains were ever discovered. Body parts were then disposed of at different locations, including Black Hawk State Historic Site. After completing this absolutely grisly task that would haunt any normal person for life, all three teenagers went to McDonald's and ate lunch together, as if they'd just finished an ordinary afternoon activity, like working on a school project. The investigation eventually caught up with them through witness statements and physical evidence. When the case went to trial in October 2005, Kolb's first trial ended in a hung jury. 11 jurors voted for conviction, but one held out for acquittal, preventing unanimous verdict. Prosecutors weren't deterred by this setback. Her February 2006 retrial in Dixon resulted in conviction on all counts after the second jury heard the same evidence. Judge James Terros didn't mince words during sentencing, calling her a cold and callous person, and I don't think that's going to change, based on her lack of remorse and her behavior throughout proceedings. He sentenced her to 48 years for the primary offense, plus 5 consecutive years for concealment of evidence, a total of 53 years that she must serve. Under Illinois law, as interpreted by a 2019 Supreme Court ruling, sentences over 40 years for juvenile offenders constitute de facto life sentences that raise constitutional concerns about proportionality and whether teenagers should face such lengthy imprisonments. This legal development gave Kolb's attorneys an opening to challenge her sentence as unconstitutionally excessive. In 2020, Kolb filed a request for resentencing, arguing that her sentence was effectively life without parole and thus unconstitutional for a juvenile offender under evolving legal standards. She wanted a chance at parole, a realistic possibility of eventual release if she demonstrated rehabilitation. Her request was dismissed by the trial court. But the legal fight wasn't over yet. The case made its way to the Illinois 3rd District Appellate Court for review. In March 2023, the appellate court affirmed her sentence, finding no constitutional violation despite the extraordinary length of imprisonment she faces. The court noted that while the sentence was undeniably severe, it was not unconstitutional given the nature of the offense and Kolb's role in both the initial act and the subsequent calculated dismemberment. She remains incarcerated at Logan Correctional Center in Lincoln, Illinois, serving her 53-year sentence. Co-defendant Corey Gregory had his 45-year sentence upheld in 2022, when Gregory also challenged the length as unconstitutional. Nathan Gaudet, the teenager who helped with dismemberment using his grandfather's tools, served his juvenile sentence and was released. But he passed away in a 2012 car accident before reaching age 30, never having the chance to build an adult life. While some cases involve direct physical confrontation and hands-on acts, the next demonstrates that you don't need to be present at a scene to be fully responsible for what happens there. Amber Wright. Amber Elizabeth Wright was 15 years old when she sent a text message to her ex-boyfriend, Seth Tyler Jackson, on April 17, 2011. The message claimed she wanted to work things out between them and suggested they meet to talk. It was a calculated lie designed to get him to a specific location where her new boyfriend, Michael Bargo, and several others were waiting to attack him. Jackson wasn't completely naive about the situation. He suspected something might be wrong with her sudden interest in reconciliation. He texted Amber, "If you have me jumped, I will never give you the time of day." He was directly expressing his concern that she might be setting him up for an attack by her new boyfriend or friends. Amber reassured him with another lie, messaging back, "I could never do that to you." She played on their history together to convince him to let his guard down. That reassurance was another deliberate deception. When Jackson arrived at the location that evening, he was immediately attacked by 5 people, including Amber's new boyfriend, Michael Bargo, and her half-brother, Kyle Hooper. The attack was extended and brutal. He was beaten severely, struck with a firearm multiple times, placed in a bathtub where additional harm occurred, then burned in a backyard fire pit for hours while participants monitored the flames. His remains were eventually placed in paint cans and disposed of in a flooded rock quarry, where they might never have been found. Amber was convicted of first-degree offense in June 2012 and initially sentenced to life without any possibility of parole. She was the person who lured Jackson there with false promises of reconciliation and conversation. Without her text messages convincing him to come despite his suspicions, he might never have walked into that trap that evening. But her case took an unexpected turn when appellate attorneys challenged the conviction on constitutional grounds. In May 2014, Florida's 5th District Court of Appeal ordered a new trial due to violations of her Miranda rights during police questioning. The statements she'd made to police during interrogation couldn't be used against her because they'd been obtained improperly without proper advisement of her rights. She was convicted again in January 2016 at her second trial. This time, with the tainted statements excluded from evidence. Prosecutors relied on other proof, including the text messages she'd sent to Jackson and testimony from other participants who'd accepted plea deals. The jury found her guilty once more after reviewing the remaining evidence. However, the sentencing was fundamentally different this time. She received life with parole eligibility after 25 years rather than life without any possibility of release. That distinction matters enormously to someone facing decades in prison. Instead of facing certain death behind bars, Amber now has a date she's working toward. Her parole eligibility date is approximately 2041, when she'll have served 25 years from her original arrest. She'll be in her 40s when that date arrives, having spent essentially all of her adult life incarcerated. She's currently incarcerated at Homestead Correctional Institution in Florida City, Florida, with inmate number U46099. Her half-brother Kyle Hooper received the same sentence as Amber, life with parole eligibility after 25 years for his role in the attack. Michael Bargo, the ringleader who carried out the most direct actions, remains on Florida's execution list at Union Correctional Institution, facing the possibility of capital punishment for his leading role. If you've made it this far and enjoy deep dives into the most shocking criminal cases, hit that subscribe button and don't forget to press the bell icon. While Amber Wright awaits a parole date decades away, the next case involves someone who's already tasted freedom multiple times, only to have it revoked. Kelly Ellard. Kelly Ellard participated in one of Canada's most notorious youth incidents on November 14, 1997. The target was Rena Verk, an Indo-Canadian teenager who was initially attacked by a group of girls under a bridge in Victoria, British Columbia. Rena was beaten by multiple attackers in what started as a swarming incident, then managed to break free and started walking away from the scene. Most of the group let her go at that point, satisfied with having assaulted her. But Kelly Ellard, who was 15, and another teen named Warren Glowatsky followed Rena as she tried to escape to safety. They attacked her a second time, more severely than the first, striking her head repeatedly against a tree until she was disoriented and helpless. Then they dragged her into the gorge waterway. They held Rena's head underwater until she drowned, ensuring she wouldn't survive to identify her attackers to police. Kelly's legal journey was extraordinary in its complexity, and length. Her first conviction in 2000 was overturned on appeal due to legal errors in the trial proceedings. Her second trial in 2004 ended in a mistrial when the jury deadlocked 11-1, unable to reach the unanimous verdict required under Canadian law. Her third trial in 2005 resulted in conviction, but that was ordered retried by the British Columbia Court of Appeal, finding more errors. Finally, the Supreme Court of Canada got involved to end the legal ping-pong. In June 2009, Canada's highest court upheld her conviction by a vote of 8-1, ending the legal battles that had gone on for over a decade. She received life imprisonment with parole eligibility after 7 years. The standard sentence for youthful offenders convicted of such serious offenses in Canada. She later changed her name to Carrie Marie Sim, in an apparent attempt to distance herself from her past notoriety and start fresh with a new identity. While incarcerated, she began a relationship through conjugal visit programs and gave birth to her first offspring behind bars. Later, while on day parole living in the community, she had a second offspring. She was granted day parole multiple times, allowing her to live in the community while remaining under supervision. But then serious issues arose repeatedly. In June 2025, her day parole was revoked after she tested positive for methamphetamine use, refused to provide additional urine samples for testing, and displayed what parole officers described as hostile, argumentative behavior toward supervision staff trying to help her. A 2016 psychological assessment had found she posed moderate to high moderate risk of future harmful behavior, even after years of incarceration and programming. That assessment proved accurate when her substance use relapse and attitude problems led to her return to custody. She is now back in federal custody at 42 or 43 years old. The case inspired a 2024 Hulu series called Under the Bridge that brought renewed attention to what happened to Rena Verk. While Amber Wright awaits a parole date decades away, the next case involves someone who's already tasted freedom multiple times only to have it revoked. Christy Koslow. Christiane Koslow was 17 years old when she recruited her 19-year-old boyfriend, Brian Salter, and his friend Jeffrey Dillingham to end the lives of her father and stepmother in their Fort Worth, Texas home. The motivation was purely financial. She promised them $1 million each from her anticipated $12 million inheritance if they successfully carried out her plan. She provided everything they needed to execute the plan. She gave them the alarm code that would allow them to enter without triggering security. She drew detailed layouts of the house showing exactly where each bedroom was located. She handed them a key that would unlock the door. She was the mastermind who made the entire operation possible. Her stepmother, Karen Koslow, was 40 years old, an oil heiress and active philanthropist in the Fort Worth community who had married into the family. On March 12, 1992, Dillingham struck her repeatedly with a steel pry bar they'd brought for this purpose. Then Salter used a knife to slash her throat so deeply she was nearly decapitated. The attack was extraordinarily brutal, even by criminal standards. Her father, Jack Koslow, was 48 years old, a Vietnam veteran who had earned a Bronze Star for his military service. He was also attacked that night with the same weapons. He was struck in the head and slashed across the throat, left for gone in a pool of his own blood on the floor. But Jack Koslow was a survivor. Despite horrific injuries that should have been fatal, he somehow managed to stagger out of the house to neighbors and call for help before losing consciousness. His survival meant there would be a witness who could identify what happened, though he couldn't identify who had done it since the attackers had worn masks. The investigation moved quickly once police arrived and found Karen deceased and Jack clinging to life. Detectives immediately suspected this wasn't a random home invasion given the level of planning involved. The evidence trail led to Christie when investigators discovered the plot. Salter agreed to testify against her in exchange for a life sentence plea deal that removed the possibility of execution. He described in detail how Christie had approached them with the offer, provided all the information they needed, and promised them both enormous sums of money from her inheritance. At her June 1994 trial, the evidence was overwhelming. The jury convicted her of capital offense without much deliberation. During the sentencing phase, they had to decide whether she should receive the ultimate punishment or life in prison. The jury couldn't reach unanimous agreement on the question, which meant by law she couldn't receive execution. She was sentenced to life in prison instead. Jeffrey Dillingham, who had actually carried out the most direct actions with the pry bar and knife, received the opposite outcome. He was executed by lethal injection on November 1st, 2000, becoming one of the people who paid the ultimate price for his role in Christie's plan. The twist in Christie Koslow's case is that time eventually brings opportunities even for those serving life sentences in Texas. Under the law, at the time of her offense, life sentences came with eventual parole eligibility after serving a certain number of years. She wasn't sentenced to life without parole, just life, which meant a parole date would eventually arrive. She is currently incarcerated at Hobby Unit in Gatesville, South Texas, which is the main women's prison facility in the Texas Department of Criminal Justice System. Her inmate number is 0067775 in their records. She works as a prison butcher in the facility, a job assignment that requires trust and responsibility. She also takes college classes, including theater arts, working toward educational goals while serving her sentence. Her father, Jack Koslow, survived his injuries, but lived with the physical and emotional scars for the rest of his life. He knew his own daughter had orchestrated the attack that ended his wife's life and nearly ended his own. He passed away on October 31st, 2023, never seeing his daughter released from prison, but knowing her parole date was approaching. Her parole eligibility date is March 27th, 2027, which is less than 2 years away as you're reading or hearing this. That's 35 years from the offense date, a length of time that represents most of her entire life. She was 17 when arrested. She'll be 52 or 53 when she becomes eligible for parole consideration. Whether the parole board will actually release her is another question entirely. Parole eligibility doesn't guarantee release. It just means she can appear before the board and make her case. The board will consider many factors: her behavior in prison over 3.5 decades, whether she's completed rehabilitative programming, whether she demonstrates genuine remorse, and whether she poses any risk to public safety. In a 2002 interview years ago, she stated, "If I could take it back, I would. If there was any way I knew of to go back and stop it, I would." Whether this represents genuine remorse or calculated words to improve her parole prospects is something the board will have to evaluate when she appears before them. The parole board will also hear from anyone who wants to speak about the case. Karen's family members can appear and explain why they believe Christie should remain in prison. They can describe the loss they've experienced and their fears about her potential release. The board weighs all of this testimony carefully before making decisions about life sentences. Christie Koslow has spent 35 years behind bars for orchestrating the attack that ended her stepmother's life and nearly ended her father's. She promised 2 young men $1 million each to carry out her plan. One of those men was executed. The other is serving life. And Christie is approaching the moment when she'll learn whether 3.5 decades is punishment enough. While Christie's parole date approaches with certainty, the next case involves conflicting information about whether release has already occurred. Monique Maestas, Monique Maestas and her brother Bo Maestas carried out an attack in retaliation for what they believed was a scam involving their mother. Their mother and her boyfriend had sold the siblings what they claimed was a controlled substance for $125, but it turned out to be salt. Enraged by what they perceived as being cheated, they returned to the family's trailer at Casablanca RV Park in Mesquite, Nevada with butcher knives. The targets of their rage weren't the adults who had allegedly scammed them. Instead, they went after two individuals who happened to be at the trailer that day. The victims had no involvement in any transaction. They were simply present when Monique and Bo arrived seeking revenge. One victim was struck 6 times with a knife and perished. The wounds included severing the jugular vein and cutting the tongue. Another victim was struck 20 times and survived, but with life-altering injuries, including having the spine severed, leaving permanent paralysis. The brutality of the attack shocked even experienced investigators who had seen many terrible crime scenes. The victim's mother wasn't home during the attack. She was at a nearby casino. When she returned and discovered what had happened, the scene was nightmarish. One victim had perished from the wounds. The other was still alive, but catastrophically injured and would never walk again. Monique came from a deeply troubled background that helped explain but didn't excuse what happened. Her father, Harry Maestas, was a twice-convicted person responsible for taking lives in separate incidents. The siblings had suffered severe neglect and harm throughout their upbringing. But these circumstances, while tragic, didn't justify what they chose to do to innocent individuals. In jailhouse letters that were later obtained by investigators, Bo wrote disturbing statements about what they'd done, showing no remorse whatsoever. His words demonstrated complete lack of empathy for the suffering they'd caused. These letters became evidence of his mindset and lack of rehabilitation potential. Monique pleaded guilty in August 2006 to first-degree ending and attempted ending, avoiding a trial that would have put the surviving victim through the trauma of testifying. She received 47 years to life in prison for her role. This meant she would have to serve at least 47 years before becoming eligible for any parole consideration. Her brother Bo received a different outcome. He was sentenced to the ultimate punishment and remains on Nevada's execution list at Ely State Prison, awaiting the possibility that his sentence will eventually be carried out. Nevada hasn't conducted executions in recent years, so he remains in limbo on their roster. The twist in Monique Maestas' case is the conflicting and confusing information about her current status. Some sources claim she was released on parole in 2024 and now resides in Connecticut with a husband she met and married. Other sources state she remains incarcerated and serving her sentence. Without official verification from Nevada correction systems, it's impossible to confirm which version is accurate. What is documented is that in 2012, a corrections officer pleaded guilty to having an inappropriate relationship with her while she was housed at Florence McClure Women's Correctional Center. This violation of professional boundaries and regulations led to the officer facing charges. After this incident came to light, Monique was transferred out of Nevada to an out-of-state facility for security and administrative reasons. Interstate transfers of prisoners are common when there are security concerns or when facilities need to manage populations. When she was moved out of Nevada, the public trail of information about her status became much harder to follow. Records from other states' correction systems don't always appear in searches, and privacy laws can limit what information is publicly available. If she was indeed released in 2024, as some sources claim, that would mean she served approximately 18 years of her 47-year minimum sentence. This would be highly unusual and would require either a sentence reduction, successful appeal, or some other legal mechanism that isn't documented in public records. Typically, someone sentenced to 47 years to life would have to serve much closer to that full minimum before parole consideration. If she remains incarcerated, as other sources suggest, she would still have many years left to serve before reaching her minimum 47-year mark. She was 16 when the incident occurred in 2003, making her approximately 37 or 38 years old now. Her earliest possible release under the original sentence wouldn't come until around 2050, when she'd be in her 60s. The uncertainty itself is notable. In most cases, especially those involving such serious offenses and significant sentences, current incarceration status is relatively easy to confirm through Department of Corrections databases and public records. The conflicting information in Monique's case suggests either incomplete reporting, errors in secondary sources, or circumstances that have made her status genuinely difficult to verify. Official verification from Nevada Department of Corrections, the state where she was originally incarcerated, or from whichever state facility currently houses her if she remains in custody, would be needed to confirm her actual current status definitively. Without that official confirmation, the question of whether Monique Maestas is currently free or still serving her sentence remains genuinely unclear. While Monique's status remains uncertain, the next case occurred in a different country with very different laws about accountability. Natsumi Tsuji. Natsumi Tsuji committed one of Japan's most shocking incidents when she was just 11 years old, making her one of the youngest people on this entire list. On June 1, 2004, she ended the life of her classmate Satomi Mitarai by slitting her throat with a box cutter during their school lunch hour at Okubo Elementary School in Sasebo, Japan. The case became an internet phenomenon almost immediately. Tsuji was dubbed Nevada Tan after the University of Nevada sweatshirt she wore in a class photo that circulated online. The name stuck and spread across Japanese internet forums and eventually worldwide, turning a terrible tragedy into something people discussed with dark fascination. Tsuji was described as a gifted student with an IQ measured between 140 and 143, well above average, and in the range considered highly gifted. She had been an excellent student who excelled academically, but she'd grown increasingly isolated after her mother removed her from the basketball team when her grades slipped slightly. Her mother was intensely focused on academic performance above all else. She developed a fascination with certain types of media content during this period of isolation. She watched the film Battle Royale repeatedly, a Japanese movie about students forced to fight each other. She was later diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome, which helped explain some of her social difficulties but didn't excuse what she chose to do. The motive was related to online interactions. Satomi had posted derogatory comments about Tsuji on an internet bulletin board, calling her names including references to her weight. This cyberbullying occurred in the early days of internet forums, when schools and parents didn't yet understand the impact of online harassment. The words hurt Tsuji deeply, festering in her mind. 4 days before the incident, Tsuji decided what she would do after watching a television program about a fictional ending. She planned it methodically over those 4 days, thinking through exactly how and when she would carry it out. This wasn't an impulsive act. It was calculated and predetermined. On that June day during lunch hour, she lured Satomi to an empty classroom with some pretense. She covered Satomi's eyes as if they were playing a game, then used the box cutter to slash her throat. Satomi collapsed and bled, while Tsuji left the classroom and returned to her normal activities as if nothing had happened. The school discovered what happened when they found Satomi. The investigation quickly identified Tsuji as the responsible party. But here's where Japanese law created a very different outcome than would occur in most other countries. Under Japanese law, individuals under 14 years of age cannot be held criminally responsible for their actions. This isn't a matter of judicial discretion. It's an absolute rule. No matter how serious the offense, no matter how calculated the planning, anyone under 14 simply cannot be prosecuted in criminal court. The Nagasaki family court instead ordered Tsuji's institutionalization at National Kinugawa Academy in Tochigi Prefecture, a facility for juveniles requiring intensive treatment and supervision. This was an administrative decision, not a criminal sentence. The focus was entirely on treatment and rehabilitation rather than punishment. The twist in Natsumi Tsuji's case is that she was released back into society after completing psychiatric evaluation and rehabilitation. Sources conflict on the exact date, with some saying 2008 and others saying 2013. But all agree she was released after serving somewhere between 4 and 9 years in the facility. That's all. 4 to 9 years for ending another person's life. Upon release, her name was presumably changed following standard practice for released juvenile offenders in Japan. The government provides new identities to allow them to reintegrate into society without the burden of their past following them. Her current whereabouts are completely unknown and protected by privacy laws. There are no public records of where she lives, what she does, or whether she's had any contact with the justice system since release. No criminal recidivism has been reported publicly, which could mean she's successfully rehabilitated and lives a normal life. Or could simply mean any subsequent issues haven't been connected to her past identity. The Japanese system prioritizes privacy and rehabilitation over public notification. At a 2024 symposium marking the 20th anniversary of Satomi's passing, Satomi's elder brother stated, "It happened 20 years ago, but it feels like yesterday." His family still grieves while the person responsible lives freely, somewhere in Japan under a new name, possibly married with a family, possibly pursuing a career, possibly completely integrated into society with neighbors who have no idea about her past. While Natsumi's case involved a single victim, the next incident resulted in 4 individuals losing their lives in one terrible evening. Christine Paolilla. Christine Paolilla participated in ending the lives of 4 people at a Clear Lake City, Texas, home on July 18, 2003. The victims were her friends, Rachel Colarutis and Tiffany Rowell, both 18 years old, along with Marcus Priscilla, who was 19, and Adelbert Sanchez, who was 21. Over 40 shots were fired from a 9mm pistol and .38 revolver in the attack. The scene was horrific, even by standards of terrible incidents. When Rachel attempted to crawl toward a phone to call for help after being struck multiple times, Christine beat her head with the pistol, fracturing her skull to prevent her from making that call. The level of sustained attack went beyond what was necessary and showed a complete lack of mercy. Christine had a troubled early life that shaped who she became, but didn't excuse what she chose to do. Her father passed away in a construction accident when she was just 2 years old. She was then raised primarily by grandparents after her mother lost custody due to substance issues. As if that weren't enough difficulty, she was diagnosed with alopecia as a young person, losing her hair, eyebrows, and eyelashes completely. She wore wigs and thick glasses throughout her youth. Here's an ironic and tragic detail. Her victims, Rachel and Tiffany, had actually befriended her during high school and helped transform her appearance and confidence. They helped her with makeup techniques to compensate for missing eyebrows and eyelashes. They encouraged her socially. Their kindness made such an impact that she was later voted Miss Irresistible at school. A remarkable transformation for someone who'd been so insecure about her appearance. In 2003, she began dating Christopher Lee Snyder, who was 21 and had an extensive criminal record. He was a terrible influence who encouraged her worst impulses. Together, they decided to go to the house to take controlled substances they knew would be there. The plan was supposed to be simple: get in, take what they wanted, get out. But it escalated into something far worse. The case went unsolved for 3 years, becoming a frustrating cold case for investigators who had physical evidence but no suspects. Then in July 2005, Christine confessed to her husband, someone she'd met while both were in rehabilitation treatment. He was shocked by what she told him and struggled with what to do with the information. Eventually, an anonymous Crime Stoppers tip led to her arrest in July 2006. Christopher Snyder never faced trial for his role. He ended his own life through overdose before he could be arrested and charged, avoiding accountability for what he'd participated in that terrible evening. This meant Christine would face the legal consequences alone. She was convicted of 4 counts of capital offense on October 13, 2008. The jury heard all the evidence about the sustained attack, the execution-style nature of some shots, and the beating of Rachel's head when she tried to call for help. The prosecution had a strong case built on physical evidence, her confession, and the testimony of her husband about what she'd told him. She received life in prison. The ultimate punishment was excluded as an option because she'd been 17 at the time of the offense, just below the age threshold that would have allowed capital punishment. So life imprisonment was the maximum sentence available. The twist in Christine Paulilla's case is how long her path to potential freedom stretches. She is currently incarcerated at Christina Melton Crane Unit in Gatesville, Texas, the same facility that houses other women serving lengthy sentences. Her parole eligibility date isn't until July 2046, more than 20 years from now. She'll be approximately 60 years old when that parole eligibility date arrives. She was 17 when the incident occurred. That means she'll have spent roughly 43 years behind bars before she can even appear before a parole board to make her case for release. Whether the board will actually grant parole when that date arrives depends on many factors that won't be evaluated for another 2 decades. While Natsumi's case involved a single victim, the next incident resulted in 4 individuals losing their lives in one terrible evening. Alyssa Bustamante. Alyssa Bustamante ended the life of Elizabeth Olten simply because she wanted to know what it felt like to take someone's life. That's it. No other reason, no argument, no theft, no jealousy. Just pure curiosity about what the experience would be like. This motive makes the case particularly chilling. Elizabeth lived just 4 houses down from Alyssa in St. Martins, Missouri. She was a neighbor, someone Alyssa saw regularly. On October 21, 2009, Alyssa convinced her own 6-year-old sister to bring Elizabeth over to play. The little sister had no idea she was being used to lure someone to a terrible fate. Alyssa had been planning this for at least 5 days before it happened. She dug 2 shallow graves in advance, one for Elizabeth and apparently one for her own sister if she decided to take both. She prepared the site. She thought through the logistics. This wasn't an impulsive act done in a moment of rage or fear. It was calculated and predetermined. She lured Elizabeth into the woods with promises of showing her a surprise or something exciting. Once they were alone in the isolated area, Alyssa strangled Elizabeth, then slit her throat, then stabbed her 8 times to ensure she was gone. The multiple methods showed this wasn't about a quick ending. It was about the experience of taking a life. After completing her plan, Alyssa buried Elizabeth in one of the pre-dug graves and covered it. Then she went home, cleaned herself up, and attended a church dance that evening. While hundreds of volunteers searched desperately for missing Elizabeth through the night, Alyssa was at church acting completely normal, as if nothing had happened. Her diary entry, which was later seized by the FBI, provided damning evidence of her mindset. She wrote, "I just killed someone. I strangled them and slit their throat and stabbed them. Now they're gone. It was amazing. I gotta go to church now. LOL." The casual tone, the enthusiasm about the experience, the LOL before going to church. It revealed someone completely detached from normal human empathy. Alyssa came from a troubled home environment that shaped her, but didn't excuse her choices. Her mother had serious substance issues. Her father was imprisoned for assault. Grandparents had custody of Alyssa and her siblings. She'd been hospitalized after an attempt on her own life in 2007. Her YouTube profile had listed "cutting and doing things I'm not supposed to" as hobbies, dark warning signs that weren't taken seriously enough. She was 15 when this occurred. Initially charged as a juvenile, prosecutors successfully moved to have her tried as an adult given the calculated nature of the planning and the horrific details of what she'd done. She eventually accepted a plea agreement to avoid trial. She pleaded guilty to second-degree ending and armed criminal action, receiving life with possibility of parole for the primary offense, plus 30 consecutive years for the armed criminal action charge. The consecutive nature of the sentences is crucial. She has to serve them one after the other, not at the same time. Her parole was denied in July 2024 when she first became eligible under the life sentence portion. But even if future parole boards eventually grant her release from the life sentence, she still has the 30 consecutive years for armed criminal action to serve after that. This structure means her actual imprisonment will last much longer than just the life sentence might suggest. Missouri Senate Bill 754, signed into law on July 9, 2024, amended laws to block second-degree offense convictions from early parole in cases like this. The timing was notable, signed just days after her parole denial. The law strengthens restrictions on exactly the type of sentence she received. The twist in Alyssa Bustamante's case is the mathematical reality of consecutive sentences. She is currently incarcerated at Chillicothe Correctional Center in Missouri. Her next parole hearing is scheduled for 2029. But even if that board were to grant parole on the life sentence, which seems unlikely given the nature of her offense, she would then begin serving the 30 consecutive years for armed criminal action. Given the structure of her sentencing, her projected earliest possible release isn't until approximately 2059, when she'll be roughly 65 years old. That's assuming parole is granted at the earliest possible opportunity and the consecutive sentence is served in full. She was 15 when she dug those graves. She'll be collecting retirement age if she ever walks free. Elizabeth's mother, Patricia Price, pursued civil action against Alyssa's family and won a $5 million settlement in 2017. The money can never replace Elizabeth, but it provided some sense that accountability extended beyond just criminal punishment. While Alyssa acted alone out of curiosity, the next case involved two best friends who turned on a third. Sheila Eddy. Sheila Ray Eddy and co-defendant Rachel Schoaf ended the life of their mutual best friend Skylar Neese by inflicting over 50 stab wounds in a premeditated attack on July 6, 2012. The three had been friends for 8 years, practically their entire adolescence. They'd grown up together, shared secrets, attended school together, and spent countless hours in each other's company. When asked during interrogation why they did it, Schoaf stated simply, "We didn't like her and didn't want to be friends with her anymore." That was the explanation. They didn't want to be friends anymore, so they ended her life instead of just ending the friendship. The casual cruelty of that reasoning shocked investigators. But at a 2024 parole hearing, Schoaf revealed additional context. She and Eddy had been in a romantic relationship and feared Skylar would expose them. Whether this was the primary motive or an additional factor, it suggested the decision wasn't quite as random as "we didn't like her" initially implied. They picked up Skylar at 12:30 a.m. on July 6th, ostensibly to drive around and smoke together, something they'd done many times before. Skylar had no reason to suspect anything was wrong. She trusted them completely. They were her best friends. When Skylar turned to get something from the car, they counted to 3 and attacked simultaneously from behind. The attack was sustained and brutal. Over 50 stab wounds were inflicted as Skylar fought for her life. She knew who was harming her. Her last moments were spent being betrayed by the 2 people she trusted most in the world. After she stopped moving, they tried to bury the body but couldn't due to rocky ground at the location they'd chosen. Instead, they covered her with branches and debris. Skylar was initially treated as a runaway. Her parents knew something was wrong. Skylar wasn't the type to just leave, but police followed standard protocols for missing teenagers. Eddie and Schaff participated in searches, posted on social media about hoping Skylar would come home safely, and acted like concerned friends. They were convincing enough that suspicion didn't immediately fall on them. The break came 6 months later, when Schaff suffered what was described as a nervous breakdown. She was hospitalized for mental health treatment. During that hospitalization, and shortly after, the guilt apparently became too much to bear. She confessed to authorities, leading police to the remains on January 16, 2013. Eddie pleaded guilty to first-degree offense on January 24, 2014, avoiding a trial where all the terrible details would be presented publicly. Under West Virginia law, she received life in prison with mercy, which means parole eligibility after 15 years rather than true life without any possibility of release. The twist in Sheila Eddy's case is how well she's apparently adapted to prison life. She is currently incarcerated at Lakin Correctional Center in West Columbia, West Virginia. According to a former inmate interviewed on the 2024 podcast, 3, Eddy thrives in prison and is described as like the queen ant with her own established social group. She has earned a culinary arts degree while incarcerated, using her time to gain job skills that could theoretically help her upon release. She participates in programs and maintains good behavior. From the outside, she appears to be exactly the kind of inmate that parole boards like to see: educated, skilled, adapted, and compliant. Her first parole eligibility date is May 2028, less than 4 years from now. She'll have served 16 years at that point, 1 year more than the minimum 15 required under her sentence. Whether the parole board will actually release someone who participated in stabbing her best friend over 50 times is a question that will be answered when she appears before them. Co-defendant Rachel Schaff, who confessed and cooperated with authorities, received the same sentence structure as Eddy. She was denied parole in May 2023 and again in July 2024. The board found her not ready for release despite her cooperation and apparent remorse. If Schaff, with her cooperation and breakdown, can't get paroled, Eddy's prospects seem uncertain at best. Skylar's passing led to Skylar's Law in West Virginia, which modified the Amber Alert system to include missing teenagers, not just younger individuals. Previously, teenagers were often classified as runaways and didn't trigger the same emergency response. Skylar's case showed that teenagers can be in just as much danger as younger victims. While Sheila's parole date is years away, the final case is so recent, the legal proceedings are still actively unfolding. Carly Madison Gregg. Carly Madison Gregg was 14 years old, the youngest on this entire list, when she took her mother's life on March 19, 2024 in Brandon, Mississippi. Her mother, Ashley Nicole Smiley, was 40 years old, a mathematics teacher at Northwest Rankin High School who was respected by students and colleagues. The triggering event was Ashley discovering Carly's hidden items, Substances including certain plant materials, electronic smoking devices, and burner phones that Carly had been hiding from her parents. Ashley confronted Carly about what she'd found. That confrontation ended in tragedy. Home CCTV cameras captured the attack in disturbing detail. The footage showed Greg approaching with a .357 Magnum hidden behind her back. Then 3 gunshots rang out, followed by screaming. The video evidence would become central to the prosecution's case, showing premeditation in how she concealed the weapon before using it. After ending her mother's life, surveillance showed Greg acting bizarrely casual. She was seen texting people and playing with the family dogs as if nothing unusual had happened. She invited a friend over with a chilling question. "Are you squeamish around deceased bodies?" When the friend arrived, Carly showed her mother's body to her. Then she texted her stepfather, Heath Smiley, from her mother's phone, pretending to be Ashley. The message read, "Are you almost home, honey?" She was setting up her stepfather to arrive at the house without suspecting anything was wrong. When Heath arrived 49 minutes later, Greg ambushed him at the front door. She fired at him, striking him in the shoulder approximately 6 inches from his face. He fought back and managed to disarm her while remaining bullets discharged during the struggle. She fled the house, but was captured nearby by responding officers. Greg was tried as an adult from September 16th through 20th, 2024. Defense argued temporary insanity due to a recent medication switch from sertraline to escitalopram, both common medications for depression and anxiety. They claimed the medication change caused a severe adverse reaction that left her unable to understand right from wrong. Prosecution experts testified she did not meet Mississippi's strict Monotone insanity test, which requires proving someone didn't know what they were doing was wrong. The surveillance footage of her concealing the weapon, her texts to her stepfather, and her casual behavior afterward all suggested she knew exactly what she was doing. She had rejected a 40-year plea deal before trial, choosing to take her chances with a jury instead. The jury convicted her on all counts in approximately 2 hours after deliberating on the evidence. The quick verdict suggested the defense's insanity argument didn't resonate with jurors. She received life without parole for the offense against her mother, life without parole for attempted offense against her stepfather, plus 10 years for evidence tampering, all consecutive sentences that stack on top of each other. The twist in Carly Madison Gregg's case is that it may result in significant legal precedent about juvenile sentencing in Mississippi. She is held at the Youthful Offender Unit at Central Mississippi Correctional Facility. Her new attorney, James Murphy, filed a 75-page appeal brief with the Mississippi Supreme Court on September 9, 2025. The appeal argues that life without parole is unconstitutional for juveniles under Mississippi law, and that no Miller hearing was conducted. Miller hearings, required by a U.S. Supreme Court decision, are special proceedings where judges must consider a juvenile's youth and potential for rehabilitation before imposing life without parole. The appeal claims this mandatory hearing never occurred in Gregg's case. Oral arguments have been requested before Mississippi's highest court. If the appeal succeeds, she could be resentenced to a term that offers eventual parole eligibility. If it fails, she'll spend the rest of her life in prison with no possibility of release, dying behind bars for something she did at 14. The case attracted extensive court TV coverage due to the dramatic CCTV footage and Gregg's extremely young age. Legal experts are watching closely because Mississippi is one of the states that still allows true life without parole for 14-year-olds convicted of such serious offenses. The appeal could force the state to reconsider whether anyone that young should face the absolute maximum sentence with zero hope of redemption. This was all from our side today. Thanks for watching. Click here to check out another video.